It's nice to see all of you. I love fairy tales. I won't apologize for it. I believe in the power of once upon a time, and tonight I'd like to share with you how these once upon a times and happily ever afters saved my life as a child, and how it can have the incredible power to save other children's lives. I was born in a small village in Kerala, India, the southern tip of India, right above the Indian Ocean and next to the Arabian Sea. The house I grew up in, my grandmother's house, was surrounded by mango trees, tapioca trees, coconut trees. And during the days, I would hop, skip, and run from one house to the other, visiting my grandaunts, my uncles, my friends, my neighbors. And in the evenings, I would bathe in the small creek near our home and sit by the paddy fields with my aunt and watch the sun go down. Occasionally, I would run and scream, "Snake!" But overall, life was good, and I was happy. But one day, my life changed. I suddenly had to move here to America to join my parents who had come here earlier in my life for further opportunities and further education, leaving everyone and everything behind. Now, moving to a new country, moving to America, there was definitely some confusion. I had to learn a new language, there were new customs, new cultures, but that confusion was the least of my problems. My destiny, my childhood took me down a darker path, a darker road. While there were definitely glimmers of hope, glimmers of happiness with growing up with 3 younger brothers who were just beautiful, I found myself experiencing long-term pain throughout my childhood and what they call long-term sustainable trauma or type 3 trauma. And what type 3 trauma is when a child experiences something like that, they have gone through either mental, sexual, or physical abuse, or have suffered long-term catastrophe and living in such a situation. I think all of us can agree that it doesn't matter what type of trauma a child goes through. Ultimately, in the end, every child deserves the hope of a happy story. Long-term sustainable trauma has incredible effect on the dark path, on brain development. As you could see, white matter actually goes missing. But it also affects a child's ability to learn, to memorize, to handle social situations, to be able to learn easily. But most of all, I think the greatest damage it can do is can damage how you believe, how you think about yourself. Are you worthy enough? Are you smart enough? Are you beautiful enough? And these type of mental messages entrenched in your psyche can actually lead to long-term, highly destructive behavior, from prostitution to violence and to many, many other things. So most people believe that when you're a child, everything is possible. But when you're a child of trauma, many things are impossible. So the question is, how do you reverse the damage that is being done if you're a victim, if you're a child of trauma? How can you change your consciousness so that you could believe in new possibilities for yourself? It's an incredible feat to turn that around, right? For me, I had a safe haven. I had solace. I had the beautiful storybooks, the fairy tales, the Cinderellas, Beauty and the Beast, Chronicles of Narnia. All these books represented to me the hero's journey, the hero's struggle, overcoming, so ultimately in the end, you are the hero of your own life. And these messages, once they become entrenched, can actually change the consciousness. Do you remember these lines? No matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep on believing, the dream you wish can come true. Cinderella. She warned him not to be deceived by appearances, for beauty is found within. Beauty and the Beast. His own image, no longer a dark gray bird, ugly and disagreeable to look at, but a graceful and beautiful swan, the ugly duckling. Beautiful messages, right? And when that is constantly repeated over and over in your head, what actually happens? You reimagine, you make believe. And I reimagined. What if, like Cinderella, I was kind no matter what? What if, like Beauty in Beauty and the Beast, I appreciated someone's inner beauty, also others' inner beauty, including myself? What if, like in The Ugly Duckling, that there was more to me than what was seen in the eye? What if, like Little Red Riding Hood, I could conquer the big bad wolf and shape my own destiny? What if I myself can also live happy ever after? Very, very strong messages, and it is this power, the power that fairy tales can save a life, is what I have taken and shared with 143 million orphans around the world, 25 million refugees, and as you know in the news, many, many more children are experiencing tremendous trauma. Let me show you some of my work. I ended up going into, like they mentioned earlier, doing my MBA, worked in business planning, ideation, all of these things. But about 9 years ago, I left it all to start Book Walla organization. These are some of the children. Refugee children having fled war and violence, Rohingya refugees, and they now live on the border of Myanmar and Bangladesh. You can imagine the trauma after experiencing people being murdered right in front of them. Children of farmers who committed suicide because of severe drought conditions. 30% of these children end up committing suicide themselves or attempting to commit suicide themselves. Children found starving in the streets, and being rescued and brought into an orphanage. Now, for all the cynics out there, we were fortunate enough to have psychologists on our board, and we start to look at whether or not there's a correlation between the storybooks, the fairy tales, and some of the very attributes and qualities that suffer when children go through trauma. So take a look at this. Slight decline as they get used to the programming, and the increase. Isn't that amazing? So increased persistence. A decrease in hyperactivity. This is all under 1 year. An increase in hope. And the pro-social conduct, the ability to deal with others, and ultimately in the end, be able to socially integrate. Children who just started with the Book Walla program and the treatment with the Book Walla social emotional storytelling sessions. Isn't that amazing? Now this is just some data, but one story I'd like to be able to communicate, and it's a beautiful story that represents the power of these fairy tales. There was a little girl named Roshni who lives in one of the orphanages. And when we first started our storytelling sessions, Roshni was very angry, disruptive. She was just always upset. And about 6 months to 8 months, we found out that she was actually sexually abused by her own biological father. But she was brave enough to speak up because she saw the father moving on to the younger sister. So you can imagine the fear, the trauma, and because of her bravery, she was kicked out of the home. Now, 6 months, 8 months into our sessions, one of our project leaders received a beautiful thank you card with ducks in the water and 1 duck flying in the air. And her explanation was, before I was in the river, and now sometimes I could fly. She was around 10, 12 years old at this time. Now she's around 15 to 16, living in the orphanage. And as you can imagine, by the time she's 18 years old, she's going to be in a much stronger, happier place. She can actually shape her own destiny. She'll have a control over her own life. That's an amazing thing that we could do with something so simple as a storybook, as a fairy tale. Now, I'm not a doctor, scientist, or a psychologist. I am here today because these fairy tales saved my own life. And these fairy tales told me that whatever is happening to me or around me, that I too have a choice to live happily ever after. Thank you.